Hi, I'm Mayela. My sister accused me of stealing a $16,000 necklace. My parents didn't ask questions. They just told me to leave. So I did. And I stopped paying their mortgage, their bills, her tuition, all of it. They erased me from the family, but not from the finances. You ever give everything, only to be treated like you never existed? Because what hurt wasn't the accusation. It was realizing they never saw me in the first place. And that necklace? It was never lost. So why did they need me gone? Let me tell you what happened. Lorelei's birthday party looked like something straight out of a lifestyle blog. Strings of Edison lights swaying above the patio, a rented catering truck parked beside the fence, and guests walking around in perfectly coordinated pastels. If someone had walked in off the street, they would have assumed it was an engagement party or maybe a baby shower. That's how much effort had gone into the celebration of my sister turning 35. I stood near the back door with a half-empty glass of club soda, watching as Dad handed her a small, deep blue box with a gold ribbon. It was the kind of box that could only mean one thing: jewelry, diamond jewelry. And sure enough, the moment she opened it, the crowd around her gave a collective gasp. "Oh my God!" Lorelei said, lifting the necklace from the velvet bed with perfectly manicured fingers. "Are you serious? This is real?" Mom laughed softly and said, "Of course it's real. Nothing but the best for our girl." Our girl! That phrase sat heavier in my chest than I expected. I smiled, even lifted my phone to capture a quick video, one I knew they'd expect me to email later. No one noticed that my hand shook just a little. No one knew I paid for that necklace. I'd wired the money quietly a week earlier, after a phone call from Dad that started with, "I know it's a lot to ask," and ended with, "She's been through so much lately, this would mean the world to her." It was never meant to be about fairness. Just family, he said. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him how many times I'd bailed them out. I simply transferred the 16th and went back to my spreadsheet. It's easy to disappear in a family when you're the one who solves problems silently. Later that evening, while Lorelei was surrounded by friends, taking selfies with her, and the necklace, I handed her a silk scarf I'd picked up from a small boutique. Hand-dyed, lightweight, subtle. She took it, glanced at the tag, and smiled for half a second before moving on to the next gift. I stood there, still holding the card I forgot to give her, watching her hug someone who'd handed her a candle. They clapped when she opened the box, I whispered to myself. No one asked how it got there. I left before dessert. 2 days later, I was folding laundry on the futon in my apartment when my phone buzzed. A notification from Facebook. Lorelei had posted something. The image didn't load, but the caption stopped me cold. "Still can't believe someone would do this to me. My necklace is gone." No names, no accusations. But the implications? Oh, they were clear. At first, I thought maybe she'd misplaced it. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But then came the comments. "People you trust the most can surprise you. Some folks really have no shame." One of our cousins tagged me with a question mark. I didn't reply. I didn't even like the post. I just sat there, the folded t-shirt in my lap, suddenly feeling like a weight. I stared at that post for a long time. Longer than I'd like to admit. And then the messages started trickling in. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly pinging me with, "Hey, what's going on?" Or, "Do you know what she's talking about?" It wasn't anger I felt, not yet. It was something quieter, more like erosion. Like standing on a cliff and realizing the wind's been stealing grains of ground under your feet for years. You just never looked down before. I closed the app, set the phone face down. That night, as I was washing up the dishes, my phone buzzed again, this time with a group text from Mom. "Dinner Sunday night? Would love to have everyone together again. Just a little family check-in." The emoji made me pause. Mom rarely used emojis. It didn't feel warm. It felt deliberate. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stared at the message. I thought about not responding. I thought about replying, "Is this about the necklace?" But in the end, I just typed, I'll be there. Even as I pressed send, I felt the chill crawl up my spine. Maybe I hoped they'd want to talk things out. Maybe I hoped someone would say, "This is crazy, of course it wasn't you." But deep down, I knew. This wasn't a check-in. This was a setup. I sat down at my desk, opened a blank note, and started writing down the dates. When I'd made payments, covered tuition, transferred funds. Not because I planned to bring it up. Just to remind myself, I wasn't imagining the things I'd done. I wasn't invisible. I was just easier to ignore than to thank. The next 48 hours moved in slow motion. I went to work. I answered emails. I even managed to fix a nasty data bug in one of our forecasting tools. But every action felt distant, like I was watching someone else live my day. Sunday came quicker than I'd hoped, and by late afternoon, I found myself double-checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. I'd chosen a soft blue blouse, neutral, quiet, inoffensive, nothing too sharp, nothing too loud. I drove over just before 6. The streets were quiet, just the way they always were on Sundays in our neighborhood. That kind of stillness that almost warns you. Be careful, something's coming. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed 3 cars already there. My parents', Lorelei's white crossover, and my uncle's truck. Strange. Uncle Charles hadn't been around for months. The door opened before I could knock. My mother smiled in that slightly forced way she always did when trying too hard. "Come in, sweetheart. Dinner's almost ready," she said, stepping aside as if nothing had happened. I followed her in, noticing the scent of baked cheese and something sweet. She'd made my favorite casserole, chicken and squash, the one she only ever made on my birthday. Except this wasn't my birthday, and she hadn't made it then either. Lorelei was already seated at the table, swirling a glass of red wine, nails perfectly polished, expression unreadable. Dad sat at the head of the table, arms crossed over a clean button-down. Everyone was already in position. I was the last piece of the puzzle. We sat, passed dishes like we were rehearsing a Thanksgiving commercial. The tension was low at first, like a simmering pot. Just family pleasantries, surface-level conversation. Lorelei talked about her new project, something marketing-related, and Dad made a joke about TikTok trends he didn't understand. And then, just as Mom refilled my water glass, Lorelei tilted her head slightly and said, "You know what's wild? I still haven't found that necklace." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Which one?" Uncle Charles asked casually, clearly playing his part. "The one from my birthday. The diamond drop," she replied, her eyes locking on mine. "The one I wore at the party. I had it in my jewelry box, but now, gone." A silence fell over the table, like someone had turned the volume down on the entire room. "I thought you said it might have been misplaced," I said carefully, not breaking eye contact. "I thought so too," she said, almost smiling. "But I've looked everywhere. It's not like I leave things lying around." "I'm sure it'll turn up," Mom offered gently. "It's strange, though," Lorelei continued, her voice syrupy. "I mean, Mayela, you were upstairs before dinner that night, weren't you?" I blinked. Once, twice. "Yes, I used the bathroom." "That's right, but the hallway light was off, and I could have sworn I saw your door open." "I didn't go in your room." Dad's voice cut through the air like a sudden storm. "Let's not turn this into something it's not." Lorelei leaned back, crossing her arms. "I'm just saying, someone was in there, and now it's missing." I looked at Mom, hoping she'd intervene. Instead, she kept folding the edge of her napkin. Then came the line that shifted the room entirely. "Well," Lorelei said, setting her wine down, "I found the box." That pulled everyone's gaze. "The necklace box," she clarified, eyes never leaving mine. "It was under the bookshelf, in your old room." My mouth went dry. Dad's chair creaked as he leaned forward. "Is there anything you'd like to tell us?" I shook my head slowly. "I haven't touched that room in over a year. Why would I?" People do strange things under pressure, he said, cutting me off. I didn't take it, I said clearly. You know me. I thought I did, he muttered. Mom still hadn't spoken. Lorelei added, If it was a misunderstanding, you can just give it back. No one wants this to get ugly. There's nothing to give back, I snapped, my tone firmer now. I don't have your necklace. I never did. Dad stood. Then maybe it's best you leave. Cool off. Think this through. Excuse me? You heard me. I looked at each of them. None of them flinched, not even Charles, the same man who once told me I was the only kid in the family who had a brain. I came here for dinner, not an ambush. You came here to play innocent, Lorelei muttered. That's enough, I said, voice steady. You've made your point. You want a thief, but you don't want the truth. You want drama, not facts. Dad pointed toward the door. Go. My mother stood then, but didn't stop him. Didn't stop me. So I walked. Not to the guest room where I used to stay, not to gather things, because I knew nothing in that house belonged to me anymore. Outside, the night had turned cool. I stepped down onto the porch slowly, like my body needed time to adjust to the fact that I had just been evicted from my own family. As I reached the sidewalk, I glanced up. Lorelei was watching from the upstairs window, arms folded, that same smirk still there. I didn't give her the satisfaction of looking away. No bag, no charger, not even my favorite mug from the kitchen. But I had something else now, something I hadn't had before. Clarity. I didn't go far that night, just drove until the lights faded and the air didn't smell like memories. I ended up in a dimly lit short-term rental about 15 minutes away, a converted garage with barely enough space for a twin bed and a kitchenette the size of my old walk-in closet. But it was quiet, and right then, quiet was luxury. I collapsed onto the lumpy futon without changing clothes. My shoes were still on. No charger, no change of clothes, no toothbrush, just my purse and the weight in my chest. I tried to sleep, but all I could see when I closed my eyes was that ridiculous smirk on Lorelei's face as I stepped off the porch. By morning, my phone was at 2%. I found an old Android charger tucked in the drawer beside the bed. One of those lucky coincidences that felt like it came with a wink from the universe. I plugged in and stared at the blinking screen until it flickered back to life. The first message was from work, just a meeting reminder. The second was from my mom. Hope you made it home okay. No period, no warmth, just neutral. I didn't respond. Instead, I messaged my manager and asked if I could work remote for the week. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Take the time you need." After showering, I made a list on the back of an old receipt. Deodorant, socks, toothpaste, phone charger, pain relievers, cheap flats for work calls. I took the car to a nearby strip mall and bought everything in under 20 minutes. No hesitation, no checking prices. I just needed to stop feeling like I was unraveling. Back at the rental, I laid the new items across the foot of the bed like supplies for an emergency. Maybe that's exactly what this was. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of the mattress with a reheated burrito in one hand and my phone in the other. I was flipping through social media like it owed me answers. And then I saw it. A video from Lorelei's account titled, GRWM, Birthday Dinner Look. Get ready with me. Typical. She stood in front of her vanity, curling her hair, applying foundation, talking to the camera in that fake soft voice she always used when trying to sound relatable. But it wasn't her words that stopped me. It was what was behind her, in the mirror. Hanging delicately around her neck, half tucked beneath her blouse, was the diamond drop necklace, the same one that had supposedly gone missing, the one that got me kicked out of our family's dinner, the one she'd cried over in front of Mom, the same necklace she'd said was definitely stolen. I blinked, paused the video, rewound it. There it was again, clear as day, a glint of betrayal caught in glass and pixels. I didn't react, no yelling, no calling, no dramatic post. I simply downloaded the video and took 2 clean screenshots of the moment the necklace was most visible, one framed, one zoomed, labeled them, and saved them to a folder titled Backup Personal. No one needed to know. Not yet. I stared at the screenshots for a long time, not because I doubted what I saw. I was past that. I just couldn't believe how easy it had been for her. To lie, to perform, to rip apart decades of trust with one manufactured scene. But that's the thing about people like Lorelei. They don't need to be right. They just need to be believed. 2 days later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop a few blocks from the rental, trying to piece together a version of my week that would make sense to anyone else. My laptop was open. The video paused at the exact second Lorelei turned toward the mirror. The necklace shimmered like it had its own spotlight. I didn't touch my drink, just kept tapping my fingers against the lid. What did I do with this? Send it to my parents? They'd ignore it, or worse, defend her. Say it was an old video, say I misunderstood. Post it online? That would make me the bitter one, the messy one. I thought about confronting her directly, but I already knew how that would go. You're reaching. You're jealous. Wow, obsessed much? She'd spin it in seconds, and even if I cornered her with truth, what would I win? The necklace? The right to sit at the table again? No. I closed the laptop. This wasn't the moment to shout. This was the moment to prepare. I went back to the rental and began organizing everything. Bank transfers, tuition receipts, gift records, text messages, screenshots. I wasn't planning a war. I was building an archive. I labeled folders by year, made backups in the cloud. Every time I added a file, I felt lighter. Not because it erased the damage, but because I wasn't letting anyone rewrite what I knew to be real. People only get away with lies when no one is willing to hold the truth, and I wasn't done holding it. By the time I'd finished sorting the files, the clock on the microwave blinked 3:42 a.m. I hadn't noticed how long I'd been working until the cheap desk lamp began to hum from being on too long. My back ached, my eyes burned. But oddly, I felt grounded. For the first time in days, I knew exactly what I was doing. The next morning, I woke to 3 text notifications. One from my bank, reminding me a recurring payment was due for the water utility account. Another from the mortgage company. And one from my mother. Power flickered this morning. Is that something on the city's side? I didn't reply. Instead, I sat down at the small fold-out table that doubled as a desk and opened my bank dashboard. Each monthly payment, electric, gas, internet, waste management, lined up like little digital bruises, proof of what I'd been shouldering alone for years. No one had ever asked how they stayed afloat. They just assumed the money showed up. Like magic. Or maybe like obligation. Click. I canceled the electric bill first. Click. Then the water. Then the mortgage. That one sat heavier. I stared at it for a moment. My name wasn't on the deed, wasn't on the loan. But for over 36 months, my account had paid it. If I don't live there, I said out loud, I don't need to fund it. Click. Each cancellation felt like a window opening. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally stopped participating in a version of reality where my absence was noticed only when my money didn't arrive on time. Later that afternoon, I took my laptop and headed to the coffee shop around the corner. It had become a quiet haven, a place where no one knew my last name or my sister's face. I ordered a black coffee, set up near the back, and tried to focus on work. Around 2:10 p.m., just as I was about to join a video call for a product planning session, a message popped up on my screen from a contact I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Jalen Merrick. I blinked. Jalen wasn't just a name from the past. He was Lorelei's ex, the one she never talked about after their breakup. He'd always been decent to me, though we never kept in touch. His message was short, almost clinical. I saw what happened at the birthday dinner. I was at the lounge last Friday. She was bragging about finally getting you out of the picture. I sat there, frozen, the cursor still blinking in my draft email. She said the necklace wasn't stolen, just misplaced. But when your dad reacted like that, she didn't correct him. Didn't stop it. Laughed, actually. He attached a blurry photo. Lorelei at a dimly lit bar, her head thrown back in laughter, the necklace clearly glinting beneath her collarbone. I didn't respond. Not yet. I saved the message, exported the photo, and moved it into a folder marked Quiet Evidence. I renamed it with the date and time. I knew what I was doing now wasn't about confrontation. It was about collection. The message confirmed what I already knew in my gut, but hearing it from someone else, someone who had nothing to gain, it turned the suspicion into certainty. That changed everything. That evening, back at the rental, I opened my laptop again and went straight to the mortgage payment platform. I clicked Unlink Account. The final digital tie between me and that house, gone. Then, I removed my card from the insurance account, and the property tax autopay. All of it. If they wanted me out, they were going to learn what my absence really meant. No note, no warning, just the absence of coverage, the absence of convenience, the absence of me. I closed my laptop, sat in silence. You don't realize how many ways you're still tethered to people until you start cutting cords. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just let go. That night, I fell asleep without tossing. No dreams. Just a stillness that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The next morning arrived without drama. No nightmares. No jolts awake. Just light pressing through the slats of the blinds and the mechanical hum of the mini fridge at my feet. I sat up slowly, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't in a hurry. For once, no one needed me to fix something. Still in my t-shirt and borrowed sweatpants, I walked over to the folding table and opened my laptop. A fresh spreadsheet greeted me like an old friend. I hadn't touched it since before the birthday dinner, but the tabs were all still there. Mortgage history, tuition records, utilities, credit card transfers. I opened a new sheet, titled it Personal Ledger, and started typing. First column, date of transaction. Second, purpose, rent, groceries, prescriptions, dentist copay. Third, recipient, dad, mom, Lorelei, textbook, utilities, autopay. Line by line, I built my case. I didn't cry, didn't pause, didn't second guess. It wasn't about revenge, it was about memory. I was tired of letting other people rewrite the past. By the time I finished, the total at the bottom of the sheet read 243,688 seans in 72s. It took my breath a moment to catch up. That number didn't include the time spent driving my mom to appointments, or covering surprise bills, or the interest I paid on credit cards used to float family emergencies. I printed it, stapled the pages together, slid the stack into a yellow folder, and wrote across the top in black Sharpie. Truth. If anyone ever dared to say, "You never really helped," I could hand them this instead of explaining. Around 1:30 that afternoon, while I was heating leftover rice in the microwave, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Dad. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Hi," I said, flat and unassuming. He didn't return the greeting. "Did you change something with the bills?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," I said calmly. "I canceled all the autopays tied to my account." Silence on the other end. Not confusion, just the weight of him having to speak next. "You could have at least warned us." I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted him to hear the echo of his own words. "You told me I didn't belong in that house," I said. "Why would I keep paying for a home I was thrown out of?" "That's not how any of this was supposed to go," he snapped. "We didn't ask you to do any of that. You chose to. That's on you." It was one of those lines people use when they don't want to feel guilty. Sharp enough to hurt, but just vague enough to deny intention. Like tossing a rock into a window and saying you didn't mean for it to break. "You're right," I said. "I did choose to help, every time. I chose to give, and you chose to pretend it was owed. Mela," I didn't wait for the rest. "You chose to believe I was a thief. You chose not to ask me. You chose not to defend me. And now you're surprised I stopped showing up? He said nothing. I let the silence hang between us, long and uncomfortable, before finally ending the call. Afterward, I didn't pace, didn't shake, just walked back to the microwave, pulled out the bowl of rice, and sat at the table. While I ate, I opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it, "For Attorney If Needed." I scanned every bank statement, every tuition invoice, every email thread confirming wire transfers. I organized them by year, then by category. In a separate document, I started typing a timeline. A chronology of care. It wasn't bitter, it was factual. If anyone ever wanted to drag this into court, or worse, into some public dispute, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to be ready. I didn't want to fight. But I also wasn't going to fold. Some people think being quiet means being weak. But silence can be strategy. And I was done letting guilt determine the terms. Generosity isn't a debt. It's a choice. But when that choice gets treated like an expectation, something inside you changes. And mine already had. By Friday morning, the stillness I'd earned had become routine. I no longer woke with dread. No morning anxiety. Just a quiet resolve. I brewed coffee in the dented French press left behind by a former guest of the rental, sat down at the table, and began scanning the news like I did every morning. Detached but attentive. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Haley. It was a photo of a formal invitation. Elegant script embossed in gold on cream paper. "You're cordially invited to celebrate Warren and Elira Sutter's 40th wedding anniversary." Underneath, the names, "Hosted by their daughter, Lorelei." That word, daughter, sat on the page like a dare. Only one name, just Lorelei. I stared at the image for a few seconds before zooming in on the venue name. I knew that place. I was the one who had paid the deposit nearly a year ago, back when my parents were pretending things would turn around soon. I remembered covering the first half to hold the date, Dad promising to settle up soon. The photo had been sent without comment, no explanation, just the image and the unspoken invitation to notice what was missing. They deleted me, but used my money to send out the mailers. It wasn't surprising, but it still landed like a slap. I closed the message. Didn't reply. I didn't need to. Around midday, I took a short break from work and scrolled through social media to clear my head. A bad habit, I know. But sometimes it helped, not this time. On LinkedIn, right near the top of my feed, there it was. Lorelei's new post. A filtered photo of her in a cap and gown from her recent graduation ceremony, throwing her head back dramatically under a tree, her arms raised in some overacted gesture of triumph. The caption read, "Couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad's unwavering support. Grateful beyond words." That part didn't sting, at least not as much as the comments underneath. "You've got the best parents. So proud of you and them. True definition of family." The lie wasn't even creative. It was so cleanly packaged that it almost looked like truth. And no one, not one person, mentioned the fact that tuition at her private grad school ran over $45,000 per year. Or that she'd never had a job that lasted more than 6 months. I didn't click like, didn't comment, just hit save post and logged out. But it stayed with me. I sat there, watching the cursor blink in an empty document on my screen. The words not yet there, but the fury solid and rising. That evening, I opened my email. Created a new message. No frills, no extra wording. Just truth, arranged in lines and attachments. 2. Every extended family member I still had an email for. Subject, for your information and mine. In the body, I wrote, "I've remained quiet for a long time, not because I had nothing to say, but because I believed silence was safer. I'm not sending this for pity or sympathy. I'm sending it because facts matter, especially when stories are being told without me in them." Attached were 3 PDFs. Tuition breakdown, every invoice paid from my account, with timestamps. Event deposits, wedding venue receipt, party payments, check stubs, medical expenses, Mom's prescriptions I covered when their insurance lapsed. At the bottom, I signed off with, "I have no expectations, just records." I hovered over the send button. I wasn't doing this to start a fight. I was doing this so they couldn't rewrite the story without evidence. So that if anyone dared to whisper, "She's just bitter," I could reply. With receipts. I hit send. And then I sat back. I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel ashamed either. What I felt was something cleaner, like I'd finally pushed a weight off my chest that I wasn't meant to carry in the first place. Sometimes people talk about revenge like it's loud, like it explodes or burns or leaves someone crying. But this wasn't that. This was surgical, quiet, precise. This was clarity. The first call came the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. Then another buzzed in before I'd even gotten out of bed. Same area code, different number. By the time I had poured a cup of coffee and opened my laptop, 3 more missed calls had joined the queue. All unspoken, all urgent in their silence. I didn't need to listen to the messages. I already knew. By mid-afternoon, I decided to run a few errands. I threw on jeans and a hoodie, tucked my hair under a baseball cap, and drove out to the pharmacy to refill my thyroid medication. It had slipped my mind the last few days, buried beneath spreadsheets and emotional debris. The moment I stepped inside the store, I noticed the pharmacist's assistant stiffen. She was usually friendly, Chloe, if I remembered correctly. Her smile faltered slightly as I approached. "Hi, I'm here to pick up a refill for Mayela Sutter," I said, offering the usual polite tone I reserved for public spaces. She typed for a few seconds, glanced at the screen, then looked back at me with a carefully controlled expression. It looks like your coverage was removed. It says you're not listed under the plan anymore." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She lowered her voice. "It was changed last week, retroactively. I can still fill the prescription, but it'll be out of pocket." "Of course." I nodded once. "That's fine." As she rang it up, I pulled out my debit card. The total wasn't astronomical, but the message was crystal clear. They didn't just push me away, they erased me. I left the store without saying another word. Didn't slam the door, didn't complain. Just walked back to my car and sat for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle. I wasn't just being cut off emotionally. They were cutting me out legally, financially, institutionally, as if undoing my contributions somehow rewrote my presence. Later that evening, after dark had crept in and the city lights flickered through the blinds, I opened my email to find a message from a coworker. Subject line, "You should see this." I clicked it. Attached was a TikTok clip, just 7 seconds long. Lorelei's face filled the frame, her makeup half done, curling iron in one hand. She was doing one of those "get ready with me" videos, the kind influencers love. But behind her, in the reflection of the vanity mirror, clear as daylight, was the necklace. The diamond drop necklace. The one she had sobbed over, accused me of stealing. The one that had gotten me cast out of my parents' home like an unwanted visitor. She wore it casually, tucked just beneath her collarbone, half visible as she adjusted her blouse. No edits, no filters. Just truth, hiding in plain sight. I paused the video, took 3 screenshots, labeled the file. Necklace proof LD, March 22.move. I didn't call her. I didn't send it to anyone. I opened my archive. For the next hour, I built new folders, photos, receipts, medical, voicemails, and now, video evidence. Everything had a label. Everything had a timestamp. This wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. I wasn't planning to sue. But if they tried to bury me again, I'd have a digital trail wide enough to walk straight back into the truth without saying a word. I uploaded the screenshots, double-checked the file names, backed it up to 2 separate cloud services, sent an encrypted copy to my personal email, just in case. Then I leaned back in my chair and stared at the wall above my desk. Nothing hung there, no photos, no notes, no reminders. Just white paint and quiet defiance. "They can say I disappeared," I murmured. "They can tell people I abandoned the family, But I'll know better. And now I have proof. Sometimes people don't need to scream to burn bridges. Sometimes they do it with signatures, with omissions, with quiet betrayals wrapped in polite smiles. They had removed me from the insurance like I was never born, like I was some temporary visitor who overstayed her welcome. But facts don't vanish just because someone edits you out of the family group text. As I uploaded the final file, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not rage, not sadness, certainty. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. I had receipts. I had video. And most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. The next day started with a chime. Not an alarm clock, not a text from a friend. A calendar notification from my bank. Auto payment scheduled in 48 hours. It was for the mortgage. I stared at the alert like it was written in a language I no longer spoke. It didn't take long to decide. I grabbed my laptop, sat cross-legged on the floor near the outlet, and opened my banking portal. One by one, I found the linked accounts. The mortgage, the car insurance, the trash collection service. My card was attached to every one of them. They had made me invisible, but kept my money in circulation like it belonged to them. Not anymore. I clicked Cancel on the mortgage payment first. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure? I clicked Yes without hesitation. Then the next, and the next, until everything was disconnected. The screen went blank for a second, then refreshed. Just like that. Clean. No part of me was funding that house anymore. I closed the tab and leaned back. I didn't feel proud or spiteful. I felt finished. A few hours later, as I was catching up on a client report, a new email slid into my inbox. Subject line: Cease and desist. Defamation notification. From a law office I didn't recognize. I opened it. It was a formal letter, templated and icy. The tone wasn't just firm, it was dismissive. They accused me of slander, emotional disruption, and potential reputational damage to their client, whose name was right there in black and white, Lorelei Draper. It ended with a warning. If this behavior persists, our client may pursue legal remedies. I didn't even blink. Instead, I replied to the email. No explanation, no counter-argument, just a Dropbox link with one folder titled Evidence Packet. Inside were the video clips, screenshots, emails, the ledger of payments, the TikTok frame by frame, the screenshots from Jalen, the text from my dad after I canceled the mortgage draft that read, "You're being dramatic." I didn't say a word. Let the documents do the talking. 2 days later, a second email came. One line. Our client has chosen not to pursue legal action. No apology, no retraction, just silence in the form of retreat. By the end of the week, I'd made my decision. The lease on the Airbnb was about to expire, and for the first time in a while, I wasn't stuck. I drove across town and signed a one-bedroom lease under my full name. No cosigner, no questions asked. I changed my number that same afternoon, sent a single message to my job with the update. The rest? Not their business anymore. The moving van arrived the next morning. I packed my few bags, loaded them myself, and left nothing behind but a folded note on the kitchen counter. Thanks for the temporary shelter. M. Driving out of the city, I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. The sun was setting behind me, casting orange and blue shadows across the empty highway. There was something final about the way the county line sign disappeared in my rearview mirror. No fanfare, no goodbye, no dramatic closing monologue, just departure. I didn't need them to see me walk away. I just needed to walk. They could keep pretending I never existed, but they'd never erase what I carried. And now, they couldn't touch what I built on my own. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just leaves, quiet, clean, and undeniable. The first week in the new apartment passed without much fanfare. I unpacked slowly, box by box, filling drawers I'd bought myself, hanging curtains that didn't belong to anyone else's taste but mine. There was a kind of peace in choosing your own towel colors. On the seventh morning, I woke up to soft light spilling across the hardwood floors. A breeze moved the sheer panels near the window, and for a few seconds, I let myself believe that maybe this was the quiet life I'd never had a chance to live. Then came the vibration. A text. I flipped my phone over. Mom. The message was short. No, hi. No context, no punctuation. You broke this family. I stared at the screen for a long while. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel the need to. I didn't tremble, didn't gasp, just tapped and held the message, selected delete, and went back to my coffee. Once upon a time, that sentence would have pulled me apart. I would have replayed it for hours, wondering what I could have done differently. I would have felt like the villain in a story I didn't write. Now it just sounded like someone blaming a mirror for reflecting what was always there. Later that afternoon, I finally finished decorating the bare wall in the living room. It had taken me weeks to decide what to put there. I didn't want anything generic. No live laugh love signs or store-bought motivational quotes. I wanted something honest. I pulled out a photo, one of me at age 8, standing barefoot in the backyard, holding a butterfly net and grinning like I discovered something important. Just me. No one else in the frame. I placed it inside a simple black frame and hung it in the center of the wall. Below it, I tacked up a single word I'd cut from thick cardstock. Enough. Not as a statement of anger, but as a declaration of self. I wasn't celebrating exile, I wasn't proud of the losses, but I also wasn't begging to be taken back. This home, tiny as it was mine. Not rented emotionally, not borrowed under conditions. Mine. I stepped back and looked at the picture, then the word beneath it. I spent years paying to belong. Turns out I was always enough, just too close to see it. That evening, I checked my voicemail inbox. It had been filling up, but I hadn't touched it in days. 10 new messages. I listened to none. One came from my aunt, one from a cousin, one from my father. His voice clipped, saying something about Lorelai going through a tough time. Another one asked if I could just talk to her. One of them even had the nerve to say, "We need to move past this." Move past what? Being accused of theft? Being erased? I tapped select all and hit delete. Then I muted voicemail alerts. A week later, I bumped into my old high school friend while grocery shopping. We exchanged pleasantries, nothing too deep, until she casually mentioned that my dad was working part-time at a hardware store across town. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She didn't press. The same night, I got a message from an old coworker who still followed Lorelai on social media. "You might want to see this," it said. Attached was a screenshot of Lorelai selling designer bags and shoes online. "Big closet purge," the caption read. "Moving on." The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't gloat. I didn't screenshot it for revenge. I didn't need to. Sometimes people don't get punished. They just start feeling the weight of what you used to carry for them. The truth had done its job, not by attacking, but by existing. There's a common misconception that closure requires apology, but real healing doesn't wait for anyone's permission. It happens when you stop bleeding for people who keep cutting. And I had stopped. My life now was small, but it was real. I cooked for one, paid for one, answered to no one, and that, in itself, was wealth. I stood at my window that night, watching the last of the daylight disappear between two buildings. Somewhere behind me, a kettle began to whistle. I turned from the glass, poured the water, and settled into my chair with a quiet smile. Forgiveness isn't always a door you open. Sometimes it's a door you walk past. Quietly. For good. Before I go, let me leave you with this. When I was younger, I thought loyalty meant keeping quiet. That if you loved people hard enough, long enough, they'd eventually see you. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-erasure. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's walking away with your dignity intact. And no, it won't come with applause or instant peace. But it will come with clarity, with space, with air you didn't know you'd been holding in for years. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been the one holding a family together, only to be cut out of the photo, then I hope it reminded you. Your worth is not up for a vote. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes your silence, your exit, your no, is the legacy. So now let me ask you, have you ever been erased by the very people you held up? What did you do when your giving became invisible? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, or just type 1 if this hit home for you. And if it didn't, tell me why. I want to understand every side. And hey, if you made it to the end of this video and felt something shift inside you, consider subscribing to this channel. We've got more stories that heal, reveal, and remind us we're never alone in what we've been through. See you in the next one.